Chapter 30. We arrived at a private airstrip in Paris, near the Charles de Gaulle airport. Stepping off the jet, I glanced over and there was Brandon's jet. I checked again, and it had Charles written on the side. Is that all the rich did was fly around the world, wasting fuel and impressing women? We entered the limo, and I sat quietly until we drove to Paris and stopped at the Hotel de Crillon. What's in there? I asked. The L'Obélisque. It has a world-famous restaurant. I think you'll enjoy the food. In the morning, we can walk to the Champs-Élysées and the Louvre. You said nothing about staying overnight. I know, but what's the point of going to Paris if you can't see the Louvre? His eyes pleaded, and I capitulated. Then we're home the next day? I asked. I promise, he said to me. Yet he promised me before. I shudder to think what promises he planned on breaking. When we walked through the door of the magnificent and opulent hotel, he said, "One more thing. Oh, I knew something was coming. We're staying at the Ritz Paris. Is it far?" No. He must have seen a sigh of relief cross my bemused face as I watched all the sights and caught the sounds of the hotel. I scarcely heard him or remember asking an important question. He spoke to the employees in French, but I heard the concierge ask if he wanted his usual table, to which he responded, yes. I hadn't used my French I took in high school, but it came back as soon as I heard it spoken. During dessert, I got my biggest surprise. Andrew proved to be much more than I expected, and he relished adventure. I was falling hard for him when I gazed up into the eyes of Brandon and Angela. Angela held on to Brandon when she met my eyes, and as they strolled past our table, she glanced at me and came to an abrupt stop. Look, Brandon, of all the people, your friend and rival Andrew Blake with your Miss What's-Her-Name. You know, one of your little sluts. Angela, please be quiet, Brandon said. He gestured and sat at his table across from us. Facing me no less. Did you know anything about this? I asked Andrew. No, and if you want to leave, I will understand. We're business partners, and we're making a bid on Blackstone's holdings in Asia. Brandon partnered with Maximilian Blackstone with a hotel. I thought we could pool our resources and buy one of Blackstone's casinos. He turned around, looking in Brandon's direction. There's no agreement to meet in Paris. This is just a coincidence. Brandon said something to Angela, and she reached across to slap him, and he caught her hand in midair. I think we should leave, I said. When Brandon grabbed Angela's hand, he leaned over and kissed Angela on the cheek. Is that why they married in the first place? Were they into sex games? Did they make love after a fight? I couldn't concentrate on Andrew, who looked handsome in his black suit. I didn't see Andrew because of the fire in my eyes over Brandon's kiss. It wasn't a slow burning kiss that he gave Angela, but a kiss on the lips nonetheless. I thought he couldn't stand her, but I thought he wasn't having sex with her either. A lot I didn't know. I didn't know how to get him the fuck out of my head. But I did know how to keep him out of my body. I tried to hold on to the person I once was, but that person died. I'm ready to go. Where are we staying? I'm feeling tired, I said, standing. I threw Brandon a look that promised him what someone else would get, and never again would he get close to me. Andrew walked around to my chair, took my hand and led me from the table. When I turned, Brandon and Angela were holding hands. If Brandon wanted to make me jealous, he succeeded. He succeeded in making my life a living hell. How could I be so stupid as to crave only one man? I held on to Andrew's arm and gave him a fake smile. I bet Brandon was staring. Andrew checked into the hotel, and as he promised, we had separate rooms. The rooms were exquisite as I expected. After looking at the apartment he gave me for a year or two, I was not surprised. The next morning a maid woke me to bring in breakfast, and fast behind her stood Andrew. "Wake up, sleephead, we only have one night here and I promised you that we would go sightseeing." He sat at the foot of my bed, peering at me. I hadn't noticed his eyes were deep dark gray. I had to shake my head to clear it. Was I falling in love with him and his charms? I like him, sure, but to fall in love with him would take a lot of effort that I didn't have or couldn't give at this time. I pushed him away and said, "Let me eat." He rose from my bed still smiling and placed a kiss on my forehead. I felt good. Better than I felt before. I saw Andrew strode out of the room. He had a nice walk. I like it. I was beginning to like everything about him. We spent the day at the Louvre, and when we became hungry, we stopped at a small sidewalk cafe that was off the beaten path. After Andrew ordered our lunch in French, which impressed me because I could understand very few French phrases but could say hello, and how are you, however, I made an A in French. When I become Mrs. Blake and move to France, I can practice it, I thought. He reached for my hand and took it in his. Then he kissed it and looked up and caught sight of someone walking. At the same time, the handsome young man about 21 saw him and stopped at our table. Andrew. Andrew stood and kissed his cheek. I heard that the French were casual in their showing of affection and their sex lives. "This is my friend, and maybe my fiancé Tyler." "Tyler, this is Francois." "Delighted to meet you," I said, and he kissed my hand in a light formal way. His kiss barely brushed my hand. "How long are you going to be here?" Francois asked, staring at Andrew and switching his glances to me. It didn't appear as if he was interested in me. Maybe he questioned how Andrew could find such an unsophisticated woman to occupy his time. I asked that same question. "I have to go now," he said. "Please stop by my apartment when you're in New York." "You know you're always welcome," Andrew said with his engaging smile. And once again they embraced. As he walked away, he turned and looked in our direction, as if he didn't believe what he was seeing. Francois is a friend of my family. I've known him since he was a teen. I gazed at the waiter uncork the wine, and Andrew inspect the cork. "Let's not talk about him." "When am I going to meet your family?" he asked. My eyes grew and I sucked in a small breath. "Not just yet. It's too soon to spring on my father that I have a friend who is rich. My mother died, but she wasn't so particular. She wanted the best for me, and she wanted me to be happy. Rich or poor man. Doesn't your father like the rich?" My answer was quick and short. "No. Not at all." "Then would you agree to meet my family?" "They don't care who I bring home." I glanced at him. "I mean, they are delighted at any choice I make for a companion." I guess I was only a companion because I couldn't get the notion of not ever being with Brandon out of my mind. When we returned to the hotel, I received a call from, of all people, Brandon. "Tyler, I have to see you to explain." "There is nothing you have to say to me, and how did you know I was at this hotel?" "It's Andrew's special hotel when he's in Paris. I don't think it's a good idea to continue to see Andrew." "How dare you suggest that you can affect my life by telling me who I can date? You're a married man." "I'm sorry, Tyler. I have interfered in your life enough. You're right on all counts. Until I'm rid of Angela, there's nothing I can say to you. I won't bother you anymore." "Oh, Brandon, don't give up so easy," I thought, sinking into a chair. "Don't you know how much I love you?" But I couldn't say a word to him. I didn't want to start that merry-go-round again. I was having a great time in Paris with Andrew. After all, it is the city of love, and I might just fall in love with Andrew if I allowed myself. You're right. I think it's a good idea that we don't see each other again. And I dropped the phone with my heart breaking with the sound of the phone going silent. It was my last day in Paris, and I expected to hear from Andrew, but I hadn't heard a word since he left my hotel room. I looked at the time, and then when the lights from the Eiffel Tower made its appearance, I walked to the terrace and there was the most splendid sight, and I was alone. What had happened to Andrew? I wish I had talked to Brandon a little longer. Alone in Paris, I murmured. Who do I know? Chris. I bet she's here. I called the number she gave me, and she answered. Chris. Yes. This is Tyler. Tyler. Where the fuck are you? I've been trying to locate you. You left the apartment without telling me where you were going. It's a long story. I bet the fuck it is. The cat almost died, but that's another story. I'm in Paris, I said to Chris. Well, aren't you a jet setter? Be real, Chris. I'm over here with Andrew. Andrew Blake? Yes. No shit. What are you doing with him? Wait, don't answer that, I have to do something. Call me when you get back. And she hung up. Everyone was busy, and I'm the only one counting the flowers in the wallpaper. I managed to fall asleep, and when I woke, I received a call from Andrew's pilot, notifying me that the plane was taking off in an hour, and the limo is waiting at the hotel. Rushing to take a shower, I gathered my few things which Andrew bought at the boutique in the hotel. I threw the items into a bag, and rushed down to the lobby to find a limo waiting. The driver opened the door, and I slid in, and a smiling Andrew was there sitting next to me holding a glass of wine. You have to try this wine. I bought a case. I'm angry with you, Andrew. Please don't be. I had this last-minute meeting, which I couldn't get out of. I never know the time. I've never been on time for anything. I'll probably be late for my wedding. What was he saying to me? My eyes met his. He reached for my hand and kissed it. My legs weakened at the sight of his handsome body clothed in a camel-colored suit. He was hot sitting with his shirt opened, and I fell for his sweet words and soft smile. Desire spread over me, and I forgot that he left me alone in Paris. My desire covered me like a winter coat, warming me, protecting me, making me forget the brutal cold. We arrived at the airfield and prepared for the 12-hour flight back to New York. I slept the entire night after Andrew gave me something to ease the jet lag that may come the next day. Chapter 31. I woke in the bed in the wonderful apartment that Andrew graciously gave me. I turned away from the floor-to-ceiling windows, after enjoying waking to the clouds. Sitting in the chair across from the bed was Andrew. He wore a smile that lightened my day. What are you doing here? I asked. I never left. You slept here? I had to know you were okay. And, he hesitated, put his rolled fist to his mouth, I want to ask you to marry me. What? We just met. I'm confused. I know what I want. I want you. But I don't know, I said. I know nothing about you. I don't know if I love you. I promise you once you get to know me, you'll love me. I'll spend my life making you happy. And I'll be traveling a lot, and you will miss me, and when I come back you will want me more. He continued, give me a chance to show you the world. You deserve more than waiting for Brandon to divorce Angela. Andrew convinced me that I could love him, and not Brandon. He was a good salesman, but did that make for a good husband and lover? I questioned my judgment because I was considering his proposal. Marrying him could make my life easier, I thought. I wouldn't have to think about Brandon as much. I would concentrate on Andrew. There were many benefits to marrying him. I had forgotten a very important person when making a decision like this: my father. I don't know. I have to see my father first. This is a big decision. I don't want to get engaged to you for the wrong reasons. Let me go to him and ask for your hand. I don't know. He doesn't know that I am seeing anyone yet. I'll have to break the news, I said to Andrew. Then I want you to wear this ring. You can call it an engagement ring, or you can say it was from an admirer. He reached into his pocket and went to his knees and said, "Will you marry me?" I stared at him. I wasn't happy and I wasn't sad. I felt numb. "Just a formality," he said. He took my hand and placed the solitaire diamond ring on my finger. I had never had anyone ask for my hand in marriage, and I must have been overwhelmed and didn't think it over. It was a step into the Grand Canyon, and I was approaching it with a blindfold on. I don't know what to say or do. "Say you will consider my proposal," he said to me. I will consider your proposal. Andrew stood and leaned over to kiss me and walked out of the bedroom. I heard the door closing behind him. I had forgotten about my job. I placed the call to the secretary and stated that I would be in Thursday. "Mr. Blake informed us that you were resigning and was under his employment." I was shocked that I wasn't consulted about that arrangement. Why would Andrew make plans without telling, or me without telling me? I wasn't going to stand for this. I made up my mind that I would pay a visit to his apartment and give his handsome ass a piece of my mind. But first I needed to talk to my father. I called my father and said that I would be in New Jersey in the afternoon. Then I called a car rental company and asked for a rental car. The company sent it over. After dressing and feeling great, I went to the lobby to discover the car was waiting. I got into the rental and drove to New Jersey. My father was sitting on his porch in a swing. The house had been built in the 40s for veterans returning home from the war. The homes sat next to each other with barely any room for privacy. On a Saturday night, I could hear Mr. Clancy screaming at his children to get in before the sun went down. Or to the left of us, Mr. Brown terrorizing his family because of his drunken tirades. Walking up the brick steps to the porch were memories of seeing my mother and father sitting in the swing some soldier had built to bring peace to his mind. My father was now the recipient, and I could see that he enjoyed the pleasure it brought him. I sat on the side of him in silence. He hugged me and I hugged him back. "You've been gone so long," he said with a sad voice. "It's only been a month, Dad," I said, holding his hand. "A month is like a lifetime to an old man." "You're not old. You still have a gorgeous head of hair. And I've seen how the women in the neighborhood smile at you and want to feed you. Well, I never have to worry about food, but enough of me." That young man with the fancy limo came by. "Brandon?" I said, surprised and happy. "No. I'm pretty sure his name was Andrew something." I had asked Andrew not to see my father until I broke the news. My father's face wore a frown at the sound of his name. "Andrew. Are you sure?" "Bright as rain," he said, describing him. It was Andrew. "I have a bad feeling about him." "Oh, Daddy, you've a bad feeling about every boy I've liked. High school is different. I'm a woman now," I said. "It's something about him." "Is it because he's rich?" I said. "That too, but I know men, and he's not all he pretends." I understood why my father was protective of me, but I had to find out things for myself. It was what you called living and learning. There were so many things that I wish I could do over. Sleeping with and loving Brandon was one. Nevertheless, that week with him was the best time of my life. And I will never forget my one true love. After cooking my father's favorite meal, spaghetti, meatballs, and sausage, I headed back to New York. I needed to talk to Andrew. I had hooked my phone to the Bluetooth connection in the car, and I could talk at will without risking an accident. A call came in as I was nearing the tunnel. But the traffic was extreme, and it took longer than I expected. It was Brandon, Tyler. Yes, Brandon, what do you want? I didn't want to be so cold, but he deserved it. I know I've said this before, but it's official. Angela signed the papers, and in 30 days I will be a free man. To do what? To marry you if you will have me, he said. Andrew asked me to marry him. You can't do that. Please see me first. I just arrived home. Come see. I pulled into the tunnel, and the phone went silent. I didn't know if I was excited or angry. Why do things come to you when you don't care anymore, or you don't need it anymore? Turning off my phone, I drove straight to my apartment and parked in the garage. I entered the lobby and headed for the door. Andrew's apartment lay across from mine. How convenient. After parking the car, I walked through my lobby and out the door and headed across the street. It felt good walking again. I entered Blake's apartment building, and the concierge stopped me. I'm Mr. Blake's fiancé. Oh, go right in, Ms. Burns, it's the penthouse. Mr. Blake is in, the doorman smiled. I want to surprise him. Don't tell him I'm coming, I said, returning the smile. In that case, take the elevators to the left. It will open into the apartment, he said, smiling back. I wanted to confront him for not considering my feelings and not listening to me. How were we to have a relationship if he didn't respect my wishes? The door opened, and I walked into another palace in the sky. An ultra-modern apartment of chrome, glass, and mirrors. Modern paintings decorated the walls. To my surprise, a large painting by Andy Warhol of a young teenager. The teen was Andrew, and Warhol painted his picture. I walked closer to see the signature. It was him. The foyer stretched long and wide, with Italian marble on the floor. In the center, a glass table and a Chinese vase filled with beautiful real flowers. A silk Chinese runner led to the gleaming polished hardwood floors. When I reached the living area, there was a contrast of old-world paintings and furniture. It looked like a combination of library and entertainment room. A place to read and discuss and party. The paintings were held in gilded wood frames, with each painting adorned in its own spotlight. Velvet hunter green drapes were anchored with velvet sofas facing each other, with a giant table setting in the middle. The room contained many antique chairs and Persian rugs thrown in every space on the floor. The apartment was a showcase, meant to be seen and not touched, where everything in it was wrong and right, a paradox. I passed my hand on the walls to feel the brown and gold wallpaper that set the backdrop for all the beige and gold chairs and silk drapes that hung over the windows. The room dark, so I hit a button, and the curtains opened and let in a flood of light. I called out Andrew's name and walked in the direction of the bedrooms, and the door opened. Before I could enter, a handsome statuesque man stood naked in front of me. He wasn't embarrassed, he stood as if being naked was as natural as the sunshine. And then I recognized him. Francois, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, my dear. But Andrew is my fiancé. And I am his lover, he said in his English accent. My lips quivered, and he took notice. I thought you knew that. You Americans are so naive. I got hold of myself and took a deep breath. I turned without saying a word and hurried to the door. Before I could reach the elevator, Andrew was behind me and reached for my arm and pulled me back in the apartment. "How could you?" I whimpered. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was saying goodbye to Francois." "Is that how you say goodbye?" "Are you angry because my lover is a man? Would you prefer that you caught me with a woman?" "I would prefer that I hadn't caught you with anyone." I looked at his confused expression. The kind where you have too many choices, and you can't make up your mind. "You don't understand. You have been lying to me from the beginning, and never mind." I shook my head and composed myself. "I hope you understand that whatever we had is over." Rushing for the door, I dropped my ring in the Chinese bowl on a table. I left him standing with a question on his face, as if he didn't get it. I don't know why I was crying. I didn't love him. Maybe it was because I don't have a job now and no apartment. When I got to the main floor, tears fell hitting my cheeks and sliding off into my mouth. I needed Brandon. Walking and crying, I looked a sight. I reached Brandon's apartment completely dazed. The person at the security desk called Brandon, and then he directed me to go up. "At least I can talk to Brandon," I murmured. "He wants to see me, and I'm going to tell him I'll marry him and jump into his bed if he wants me to." "I know he loves me and I love him," I said to myself, trying to come back from a devastating feeling of rejection. "He just asked me to marry him. I'm going to bury myself in his arms, because I finally have the man of my desire." I rang the bell, and he opened the door. He stood in lounging pajamas. "Oh, Tyler. You forgave me." We stood and we kissed. He pulled away, and our eyes met, and the heat of our love settled on me. I felt secure in his arms. I felt wanted in his arms. I felt needed in his arms. And then all that I cherished was gone. "Brandon, who is it?" A tall young blonde woman came from out of the shadows, out of the hall, and stood behind Brandon. She looked at me wearing a smile and an open robe and wearing a teddy. "Oh, hi." She waved and smiled and turned around and went back into the bedroom. "Oh my God, Brandon." I turned and rushed out into the elevator with Brandon shouting. "Stop. Let me explain." I didn't need an explanation. The door closed and down I went. Was every man I meet going to deceive me? What the hell? I'm going home. I caught a cab outside of Brandon's apartment. I jumped out of the cab and rushed inside Andrew's apartment and threw my clothes in an old bag. Packing and sobbing over expensive dresses and making a mess of them. I found the car and climbed into the Ford rental and headed back to my father's house. Over the George Washington Bridge, into slow traffic and stares from women headed home from work. They glanced my way knowing it had something to do with a man. Men were making women cry from one end of this city to the suburbs. I had to dry my eyes before I entered my father's house. I didn't want him to know that his little girl, who was no longer a girl but a woman, felt and acted like I felt, a child that wanted her mother. I climbed the stairs and knocked before I opened the door. "I'm home, Daddy." "Tyler," he said, looking up from the old-fashioned television that he bought in the 90s. "No, don't get up. I'm going to my room, and I'm home until I get another job." "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad you're back. We can do some things together." "Okay, Dad." The only things my father wanted to do now was to lie in his chair and watch daytime westerns and a few game shows. After he ate supper, he was off to bed and up early. Occasionally, he would play poker with the neighbors. After taking a shower and changing into a tee and shorts, I prepared dinner. I brought it to him on a tray and set it in front of him. When he woke from his nap, he could eat. Lately, he was forgetting to eat. He slept most of the day, trying to forget the loss of my mother. I understand, because now I wanted to crawl into my bed and sleep my days away. But I had to pay the bills. I thought about Jordan. He would be glad to give me a reference. We parted as friends when he realized it wouldn't work out. When I tell him about Andrew, I know he'll understand. I'll call him tomorrow, I thought. Walking to the front door, I looked out at the swing on the porch. It held good memories. Why not try to go back and find what I had lost? Maybe the swing would take me there, or at least make me feel better. I opened the door and walked to the swing, that had been painted white to cover its age and rust from years of being out in the elements. I leaned back, put my head up looking to the clouds. I felt at peace. Now I knew what I had to do. Then a flash of thunder shook the wood frame house and rain fell. Standing to get out of the rain, I glanced down the street and saw a dark limo barreling down the street in my direction, and then slowing as if looking for a house number. I was interested in who the limo belonged to, and where it was going to stop. My hair and clothes were drenched when it stopped in front of my house. Out stepped Brandon with a white linen shirt and faded jeans. He stood in the rain, at the bottom of the steps, waiting for me to invite him on the porch. I hesitated. Then I said, "Brandon, come out of the rain." He looked innocent, like a lost child who had found his mother. He stood in front of me in silence. We gazed at each other, each feeling each other's pain. "You left me before I could explain," he said. "What was there to explain? You had a woman in your bed." "She wasn't in my bed. She was in the guest bedroom. She's a friend of my sister. You know my sister. The one you promised you would attend her party, and didn't." My hand automatically went to my mouth. "I'm sorry. Tell Anna I'm sorry. I thought you were going to be there, and I wanted to tell you about me and Angela. You know about the divorce. It seems she met someone more to her liking. A count, lord or future king, I don't know who, nor do I care." "What about that girl in your apartment?" I queried, praying I could believe him. "She had been drinking, and Anna asked me to take her home. I was taking her home when she threw up in my car." "Oh no. Not the Porsche," I said, laughing. "Yes. That one. She begged me to call her parents and tell her I was staying overnight. I've known her since she was a child." "From what I saw, she's not a child any longer," I said to Brandon. He took my wet hand. "You look so beautiful in the rain, my princess." My heart broke at the sound of his words. I have never wanted anyone as much as I want you. You are my true love. And I don't intend to let you ever get away. He went to his knees on the cement porch in the rain, thunder and lightning and said, "Will you marry me?" I was looking at him and didn't answer. I hadn't noticed anyone or anything but Brandon, but my father was standing at the door. "Are you going to answer him?" he questioned with a stern voice. "It was on this very porch that I popped the question to your mother." I looked to my father for affirmation. He shook his head yes. "Yes. I knew he was the man for you when I spoke to him," my father said. "You talked to Brandon?" Brandon shook his head and stood. He pulled me to him, and I felt his heartbeat when his lips brushed my lips. "Now get in the house before you two lovebirds get struck by lightning," my father said, smiling.